Welcome back, everyone, to a brand new episode from Solo Leveling Season 3. Before we dive into the intense events of Episode 6, here's a quick reminder. If you haven't already seen Episode 5, you definitely need to catch up. Episode 6 picks up right where things left off, and trust me, it won't make much sense unless you've seen what led up to it. So, pause here, check that out if needed, and once you're ready, let's get into the action. A group of hunters stood near a newly emerged gate. Among the onlookers was a young woman struggling to process what she was seeing. It was beyond belief. Two gates had manifested at the same location simultaneously. Though the school nearby had been shut down, curious students still wandered dangerously close to the scene. Just then, she noticed a hooded figure approaching the gate. She moved to stop him, explaining that civilians weren't allowed in this area. But as he lowered his hood, her eyes widened. It was Hunter Sung Jin Woo. Without wasting time, he asked her when the gate had appeared. She answered, 3 days ago. That moment hit him like a wave of regret. No one had warned him the dungeon would activate so soon after locating it. If it had been open for 3 days, someone had likely already ventured inside. Judging from the magical energy, it didn't seem especially high-ranked. Jin Woo quickly asked whether a team of hunters had already entered. The girl confirmed they'd gone in about 2 hours earlier. Alarmed, he insisted the exploration be halted immediately. The girl, confused, argued that their scans confirmed the dungeon was stable, but Jin Woo was adamant. Those hunters were in serious danger. If action wasn't taken fast, they wouldn't survive. Still confused, the girl watched as he entered the gate, instructing others not to follow. She couldn't grasp why he was acting with such urgency. He didn't offer a detailed explanation. He simply said there was no time for that. Inside the dungeon, the team of hunters stood before a massive sealed door. It was clearly the boss room, yet it was tightly shut. They couldn't understand why it wouldn't open. Even magic spells failed against it. Some hunters considered retreating. That's when Jin Woo arrived. Appearing without warning, he told them flatly. It was a trap. The hunters were startled and began questioning him. He introduced himself as an S-rank hunter, and his presence instantly changed the mood. They knew he wasn't just powerful. He was experienced. Jin Woo urged them to leave while they still could. He'd handle what was inside. Approaching the sealed door, he tried to open it, but it was magically locked. Suddenly, a message popped up before his eyes. The gates of the Kartanong Temple are sealed. A key is required. Jin Woo pulled out his key, but something felt off. This time, something was different. The hunters watched, puzzled by how he'd even gotten the door to respond. A nearby official apologized, explaining that this raid was already claimed, and not even an S-rank could override that. Jin Woo nodded and stepped back. If they were determined to go inside, he wouldn't interfere. He warned them again, though. Just then, another alert from the system flashed before Jin Woo. Unauthorized access detected. Defensive force will be deployed. The moment one of the hunters stepped forward, a massive stone guardian lunged at him, swinging a colossal hammer. But before the blow landed, Jin Woo yanked the hunter back just in time. The creature loomed in front of them, a monstrous sentinel guarding the entrance. Jin Woo turned to the others with one final warning. If they valued their lives, they should leave immediately and inform the Hunter Association. A dual dungeon had emerged. With that, Jin Woo stepped through the threshold alone. As the doors slammed shut behind him, a system alert confirmed the key holder had entered. The hall lit up with flickering torchlight. Everything was exactly as it had been the last time, unchanged and waiting. At the center stood a giant statue holding the commandments of the dungeon. Jin Woo's eyes locked onto it. This was where it had all begun. But something was different now. He saw the truth clearly. These figures weren't real monsters. They were hollow puppets. Only one being in this place truly mattered. His gaze fixed on the largest statue of them all, the one towering over the others. So, you're still pretending to be silent? He muttered. Suddenly, the statue grinned, a slow, horrifying smile creeping across its face. From under its hood came a voice, low and chilling. You've finally arrived. We've been expecting you. Meanwhile, far away,
Yuri Orlov landed at a Japanese airport. Reporters flooded the terminal, all eyes locked onto him. That day, the press swarmed Yuri Orlov, shouting for his attention and bombarding him with questions about his strategy for sealing the gate. Calmly, he faced the cameras and explained that, as always, he would construct a magical barrier around the gate. Once the spell was activated, the area would be completely sealed. Nothing would get in or out. Given that this was an S-rank gate, many remained skeptical. A reporter pressed for more details, and Orlov responded without hesitation. He admitted that his own magic alone wouldn't be enough to sustain such a high-level barrier. But his plan relied on external energy sources. Specifically, he would harness ambient mana by placing mana crystals throughout Tokyo. Once the formation was complete, the spell would tap into the crystals, absorbing energy and forming a wall-like defense strong enough to contain even an S-rank threat. He assured everyone that the city would be safe, and that this would be a moment worth remembering. Elsewhere, the broadcast was being watched with grave concern by the president of the Hunter Association. He tried to focus on Orlov's confident words, but the looming possibility of failure haunted him. What if even Orlov couldn't hold the gate? Turning to his aide, he asked about the status of Hunter-sung Jin Woo. The assistant replied that Jin Woo was currently overseeing a dungeon in the Seoul district. He handed over a report listing the details of the dungeon, which had been cleared for entry at the request of the Ajin Guild. However, the assistant expressed concerns that there might be tension between Ajin and the larger guilds like White Tiger and Reapers over this. The association president found it hard to believe, a solo-run guild rivaling major powerhouses. The idea was absurd enough to be laughable, or maybe even tragic. His aide quietly agreed. The president then asked what the point of this strange arrangement was. The reply? They were simply instructed to ensure no one entered the dungeon site for a full week.
That seemed manageable, at least for now. Just then, the aide's phone rang. With the president's permission, he stepped aside to answer. Meanwhile, the president also excused himself for a scheduled meeting. On the call, the aide received an urgent update. There had been a critical situation at the raid location. He was reminded of the school where orcs had recently been seen. It had seemed minor at first glance, but now there were reports that a double dungeon had appeared in the gymnasium and that Hunter Jin Woo had entered alone. Inside the dungeon, Jin Woo now stood before a menacing statue that had begun to rise. From its back unfolded 6 massive wings made of stone. In its hands, the stone tablet engraved with the rules of the Kartanan Temple shattered. Jin Woo, observing everything closely, noted how the laws that once governed this place had crumbled. He spoke aloud, wondering if the original rules ever held real meaning. But the colossal figure, the creator, finally responded. It wasn't that simple, he explained. Those rules were obsolete now. Jin Woo questioned him further. Why had he been summoned here? The creator answered cryptically. That's exactly the point. But Jin Woo was more interested in the identity of the entity before him. Are you some kind of monster? He asked. The figure corrected him. That wasn't the question he should be asking. Instead, he should ask, Who are you? With a thunderous clap of his stone hands, the test began. All the statues in the chamber stirred to life. This would be the final trial. If Jin Woo could survive it, he would learn the truth about himself. That would be the creator's parting gift. Jin Woo moved to summon his shadow soldiers, but the creator snapped his fingers. A wave of suppression washed over the room. All class-based skills were disabled. This trial was meant for Jin Woo alone. His followers were irrelevant here. A system message flashed before his eyes. Potion purchases from the store are disabled. Healing through leveling or daily quests is unavailable. Standing there, Jin Woo reflected grimly. His most carefully hidden trump card had been rendered useless in an instant. But the stone warriors didn't wait. They charged at him. Drawing a deep breath, Jin Woo made a decision. His abilities might be sealed, but his inventory was still accessible. That would be enough. He'd handle this with his own hands. As one of the towering stone sentinels swung its massive sword toward him, Jin Woo intercepted the strike, his raw strength shattering the weapon mid-air.
Without hesitation, he gripped a jagged fragment of the blade and hurled it back, embedding it deep into the guard's head. The stone behemoth barely had time to register the impact before Jin Woo launched upward, planting a crushing kick on the embedded shard and driving it further through the statue's skull, slamming it into the ground. But there was no time to breathe. More sentinels advanced without pause. One swung a heavy weapon, but Jin Woo parried swiftly, slicing it clean in half with a precise twist of his arm. In a fluid motion, he rolled away and reappeared behind another enemy, dual blades in hand. In a brutal sweep, he jammed them into the back of the second statue's head, bringing it crashing down. From a distance, other sentries raised their bows, launching a volley of stone-tipped arrows his way. But Jin Woo met each projectile with perfect timing, slicing and deflecting them mid-flight. One particularly massive arrow whistled through the air. He caught it with a raised arm and, with a surge of energy, kicked it straight back at its archer. It hit with such force that a large chunk of the archer's stone face was ripped away. This was the moment Jin Woo had trained for, the moment he was born for. Every move was deliberate, every strike lethal. He began tearing through the enemy ranks with terrifying precision. The creator, silently observing the battle unfold, couldn't hide his astonishment. Jin Woo had become far stronger than he had ever anticipated. The once indiscernible movements of the statues were now crystal clear to Jin Woo. He could read their patterns, dodge with pinpoint timing, and counter without hesitation. Though the stone guards were mighty, he was confident now. He would overcome them. Watching from above, ethereal figures murmured among themselves. He had indeed evolved, but this trial was far from over. The sense of danger intensified as the largest statue in the chamber began to stir. Rising to its full height, it radiated an overwhelming presence. The creator's voice echoed through the hall. "It is time to summon God." Meanwhile, several hundred kilometers away, a different meeting was underway. The president of the Korean Hunter Association sat across from the head of the Japanese Association. The Japanese chairman slid a document across the table, an agreement offering all the mana crystals from Jeju Island to South Korea.
The Korean president furrowed his brow. Why such generosity? The chairman explained his intent. They wished to secure Jin Woo's help. That brought a smile to the president's face. Calmly, he replied that Jin Woo wasn't bound to the association. But the Japanese official clarified. They weren't trying to compel anything. They simply hoped for the opportunity to speak with him. The president quietly considered the offer. Given the recent death of their strongest hunter, Goto Ryuji, Japan had no one left to contain the S-rank gate. Offering all those crystals in exchange for a conversation with Jin Woo wasn't as outrageous as it sounded. Considering what Jin Woo was capable of, the value lined up. Still, the president pushed the paper back and requested to continue the conversation without interpreters. The chairman was visibly surprised to learn the Korean president spoke Japanese. The latter explained that he had learned it as a child. His father once ran a business in Japan. Once the room cleared and the doors shut, the president's tone shifted. He leaned forward and warned the Japanese chairman sternly, if he was scheming again, he should drop it now. The chairman blinked, confused. But the Korean president pressed on. He had heard whispers, rumors that the Japanese Association had fallen into conflict with the Blade Guild, that their relationship had soured. At this, the chairman stood abruptly, his voice rising in protest. But the Korean president didn't stop. He laid it out clearly. The Blade Guild had been secretly funding the Japanese Association, and now things were falling apart. It wasn't difficult to figure out the situation. Things were clearly headed that way, especially considering the tight ties with the Japanese Association. But with the sudden death of Goto Ryuji, the one who commanded all the S-rank hunters, the system began to fall apart. Without his leadership, those powerful hunters were no longer easy to control, and the Blade Guild now teetered on the edge of collapse. Other guilds were fully occupied, dealing with ongoing gate incidents, most likely struggling to keep things contained. If the monsters from the gate in central Tokyo were to spill out, the blame would land squarely on the chairman's shoulders. The president began speaking, pointing out how Goto Ryuji had once been an exceptional asset to their nation. While Ryuji hadn't participated in the raid with pure motives,
The failure lay in stripping authority from the Blade Guild. It was the chairman who had decided to fracture the guilds, and now he couldn't manage the fallout. The blame for trying to manipulate the situation in the past fell solely on him. As the chairman looked on, he noticed the president place a black box on the table. While it wasn't a literal black box, it was the same kind of device Ryuji's team used for mission data. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The president's anger was palpable. He accused the chairman of believing he could keep everything hidden. Ignoring the topic of the crystals entirely, the president focused on the implications of those recordings going public. Ordinary citizens would be caught in the middle. The sheer weight of that thought drove him to a boiling point. He shattered the transmitter, and even the table between them, in a fit of rage. He declared that some cruel twist of fate was at play, and he had no intention of dragging the entire nation into chaos over one man's selfish actions. Reputations, alliances, none of it could be risked. If anything, they owed Jin Woo their thanks. Meanwhile, Jin Woo continued his fierce battle against the towering stone guardians. No matter how many statues he destroyed, more immediately took their place. It became clear this was a battle of endurance with no end in sight. That's when he sensed something massive behind him, a colossal statue far bigger than the rest. Realizing there was no way to evade it, Jin Woo activated his skill. Ruler's Touch. The statues chasing him were lifted into the air by its telekinetic force, but just as the enormous statue unleashed its I-beam attack, those airborne statues were obliterated by the blast. A system alert popped up. His Ruler's Touch had hit max level, unlocking a new skill. Ruler's Authority. The giant's beam was immensely powerful, melting everything in its path. Jin Woo managed to dodge, but barely. He knew, if he took a direct hit, not even his skills would save him. First, he had to take down the big one. With that thought, Jin Woo activated Sprint, leaping high into the air toward the massive statue, but the statue reacted, raising its foot to crush him. The ground shook as the foot slammed down. The statue's expression twisted into a smug grin, believing the hunter had been flattened. But to its surprise, a glowing trail appeared, darting in the opposite direction. From within the dust and smoke, Jin Woo emerged, ascending rapidly.
He charged at the statue's head, knowing another I-beam was coming. He combined Sprint with his newly unlocked Ruler's Authority, slipping into the creature's blind spot. Just as the beam was about to fire, Jin Woo was already out of sight. An almost impossible move. Though he hadn't landed a solid strike yet, he was stunned by the power of his new combo. With just a bit more refinement, this could become devastating. The statue, now aware of Jin Woo's presence on its shoulder, turned its head, only to see the hunter raising his Chaos Blade for a finishing blow. But as the attack landed, Jin Woo realized with shock he'd barely scratched it. Even a blade said to cut through anything hadn't pierced it. Accepting that brute force was the answer, Jin Woo launched off the statue's shoulder, eyes locked on a narrow crack on its face. It was the weakest point. With a fierce cry, he drove his blade straight into the gap. "Break, damn it!" The architect kept watching from a distance, fully aware that Jin Woo couldn't endure for long, but even he was impressed by the hunter's devastating strike. The towering statue was flung to the side with incredible force. Jin Woo had decided to unleash the full might of his level 103. The impact shook the entire chamber, and the massive statue finally lost its footing, crashing to the ground with a thunderous boom that echoed through the space. By the time the dust began to settle, Jin Woo had already landed. The stone sentinels around him quickly took notice and charged at him. But Jin Woo wasn't backing down. He activated his Ruler's Authority, and instantly, gravity seemed to betray the statues. Their bodies collapsed under the invisible weight, slamming into the ground. Their usual tactics were completely ineffective now. Clenching his fists, Jin Woo could feel just how far he'd come. The architect, still observing, started to clap slowly. He called Jin Woo's performance impressive, worthy of praise. But Jin Woo wasn't interested in compliments. He demanded that the architect fulfill his promise and reveal everything. However, the architect merely grinned and said the test wasn't over yet. "Did you forget about me?" he asked.
At that moment, a new emergency quest appeared in Jin Woo's system window. The final trial was the architect himself. Jin Woo read the notification carefully. If he couldn't defeat the opponent within the set time limit, his heart would cease to function. Only 10 minutes remained. As the timer began to tick down, Jin Woo asked the question that had been bothering him. "Who are you?" But the architect mocked him, calling it a foolish question, one he'd already answered. Just then, the mask on his face began to crack. With a chilling calm, he revealed the truth. He was the one who created the system. On this note, the episode 6 ended.